Again, thank you all for coming. This session is going to be about parish finances, everybody's favorite. Yeah, I think. So this family is leaving Mass one Sunday, and they're talking about what they just saw, what happened. The mother says, "Oh, that organ, it's so out of tune. Why don't they spend a few bucks to just tune the organ?" Little girl says, "At least you could hear it." "I can't even hear anything. There are dead spots in the sound system in this church. Why don't they fix the sound system?" Little boy says, "Oh, the kneelers. There's no padding in the kneelers. My knees are killing me. Couldn't they fix the kneelers?" So the wife turns to the husband. She says, "Well, what did you think, dear?" And he said, "I didn't think it was that bad for a buck." You know, here's the problem. You can't read that. But I can. It shows percent of their income that different religious denominations contribute to the church. Where are Catholics, do you think, on this list? Do you think they're the lowest one there? No. Are we in the middle? No. Are we near the top? Yeah. Third. We're third from the top. You can't read it. We're third from the top. The schematic shows that the average Catholic household gives about 1.2% of their income to their parish. In this country, the average Protestant household gives double that amount, 2.4, 2.5%. We give half as much as Protestants. What's that mean? It means if Catholics gave just the same 2.4, 2.5% as Protestants, I'm not talking about tithing here, I'm just saying the same 2.2, 2.4, 2.5%, our revenues would double. Right now, Catholics contribute about $8 billion a year to their church. We double that, $16 billion. Let me put that another way. What could your parish do with double the income every year? Every year. Think of the outreach we could do. Think of the facilities that we're letting fall apart because we can't maintain them. Think of the scandalously low salaries we pay our church workers. That's what's at stake here. And again, I'm not talking about tithing, 2.4, 2.5%. So what are you going to do about it? I always thought guilt was a good approach. Whoops, before I get into that. So the numbers show 8.6% of parishes in the country receive subsidies. I don't believe that. It's got to be at least double, probably triple that, don't you think? This is the number I picked up. Anyway, what you going to do about it? What are you going to do to increase giving? Stewardship. Okay, that's the key. And why stewardship? I don't mean a euphemism for fundraising, constant fundraising. I mean stewardship in the pure sense. Stewardship where you're changing people's minds and hearts. We're changing people in a way that makes them have a need to give rather than giving to a need. I don't know about you, but anytime we hear about money in church, it's always, well, we have a need. We have a need. We want you to give to our need. That's not going to be very effective over time. The real long-term effect of stewardship is we have to develop in our folks a need to give. We, as human beings, have an innate need to give. We have to develop that. So I've done some studies on different stewardship activities that would work towards that goal, to help parishioners develop the need to give, help a change in mind and heart. Oh, by the way, these are things we should be doing anyways. Even if we're flush with money, we had more money we could possibly spend, we should still be emphasizing stewardship in our parishes. This is who we as a church should be. So, one thing, Parish Stewardship Committee. My survey showed 56% of the parishes have a stewardship committee. What's that mean? Those that did received 12% more revenue than those that didn't. 12% increase in contributions attributed to the Parish Stewardship Committee. Some parishes, 64% of that 56%, have a separate stewardship committee. What's that do for them? 22% more. Parishes that have their own separate stewardship committee focusing on stewardship receive 22% above the average in contributions. Some parishes have a stewardship committee, but they make it a committee of the parish pastoral council. 20% of that 56% make it a committee of Parish Pastoral Council. How does that work out? Doesn't. Okay. Some parishes make their stewardship committee a committee of the Parish Finance Council. 7% of that 56% do that. Does that work out for you? That's a uniquely bad idea, by the way. If you make your stewardship, if you think we want to do stewardship, and you put your stewardship committee as a committee of the Finance Council, you're telling your parishioners, hey, it's all about the money. Just as you think deep down, parishioners do think that deep down, it's only about the money. It's not. I sound hypocritical today because all my data is about the money. But I've done studies of other things too, of the impact of stewardship activities on volunteer time and spirituality and so on. And believe me, when you do stewardship right, it cuts across the board. Time, talent, and treasure are enhanced. Okay, so my data says if you have a stewardship committee longer than 7 years, and 36% of these 56% did, 27% increase in contributions. That works. It works. But you got to work at it. It doesn't happen overnight. Don't start your stewardship committee this year and say, wow, next year we're going to have a 22% increase in contributions. It's not going to work that way. You really have to work at it, spend time educating your parishioners about what stewardship is and what it isn't. Okay, some parishes have lay witnesses who stand and tell their story about their stewardship journey. My survey, 54% of the parishes said they annually have somebody talk to their parishioners, a lay person, about their stewardship journey. They received an 11% increase in contributions. That's an activity that was effective. Who should be your lay witness, do you think? Who should you ask? How about the older, more respected parishioners? Or maybe how about the younger, more attractive families? Maybe someone outside the parish. Bring in someone outside the parish to talk. Who should be the lay witness? The answer is all of the above. Okay, you should mix and match your lay witnesses. So we asked, do you have, how many lay witnesses do you use? Those who use 2 or more received a 15% increase in contributions. It's good to hear other voices. Familiar voices from parishioners, but also voices from outside the parish. How about homilies? We asked how many homilies do you give on stewardship in a year? 38% of the parish says, well, our priest gives 6 or more homilies focused just on stewardship. 0%. Why is that? Well, a friend of mine, Mike Conroy, wrote a book called The Reluctant Steward. And then he talked about how difficult it is for priests to preach on stewardship. Nobody likes to talk about money, first of all. None of us would. But secondly, they don't get very good training in seminaries in most cases. I know there's exceptions, but in general, seminaries don't teach them how. And of course, frankly, they're reluctant. They don't feel they have any credibility. They're out there talking to me with a family and bills and college tuition, and they have none of these concerns, and so they feel like they lack credibility. So it's really hard. Okay, now what I'm not saying, I'm not saying you shouldn't talk about stewardship. If you're a priest, you have to talk about stewardship. You have to help a guy like me understand the role of money and possessions in my life. You have to. As most of you know, more than half of the parables were about money and possessions. Jesus knew that a greater threat to our eternal life is not the lack of love, it's our love for money and possessions. So we need you guys out there to talk about stewardship, talk about money and possessions. Well, what I'm saying is, I hear this all the time. A parish is saying, boy, we're suffering financially. What can we do? Oh, I know. We'll have Father give a series of homilies on stewardship. That'll turn things around. If you expect that, you'll be disappointed. Talk about stewardship, but don't expect great outcomes from that one effort. How about a parish ministry fair? You line up once a year, and you have all your ministries lined up, and folks come through, and you talk to them and try to get them to do something to volunteer for your ministry. How many of you have a parish ministry fair that I just described? My sample said 43% of parishes. The ministry fair, how many think they're wildly successful? Yeah, I didn't think so. They're not. What do they do for contributions? 0. What do they do for parish volunteers? 0. Literally 0. Parishes that have ministry fairs have no more nor no fewer volunteers than parishes that don't. Why is that? Why do people volunteer? Because they were asked, right? They were asked. Jesus asked the disciples. They didn't volunteer, did they? The apostles volunteered? No, Jesus asked. The same is true for parish volunteers. So in my mind, every parish ministry should consider themselves to be talent scouts, looking out for folks that fit their ministry, then approach them proactively. Parish ministry fairs are very reactive, very passive. That's why they're not very successful. How about making stewardship a component of your parish plan? Most parishes have a plan, a strategic plan. 41% of the parishes in our survey said, yeah, we do. 18% increase in contributions. One reason for that is because for stewardship to work, it really has to permeate the entire parish. If you're in a parish and you have one or two really diehards working hard at stewardship, supported by the pastor, but it ends there, you're not going to succeed. That's why it took 7 years for the parish stewardship committee to do something. It's got to permeate the entire parish. And having it be part of your parish plan is one way of doing that. How about stewardship and religious education? How about having stewardship as a component of the parochial school curriculum? 35% of the parishes said they do. 50% increase in contributions. Get your kids talking about stewardship. Get them going home and talking about stewardship. Getting the parents involved in stewardship. How about in the prep curriculum? 57% said they do. 8% increase in contributions. How about in the youth group? Should the youth group be talking about stewardship? Sure. 36% said they do. 15% increase in contributions. Get your kids talking about stewardship, have them taking the materials home, getting their parents involved. How about communications on stewardship? By communications, I mean, one, telling what stewardship is and what it isn't. Emphasize it's not a euphemism for fundraising. It's all about changing minds and hearts. It's all about changing your approach to your possessions. Okay? And also telling stories about good stewards. Everybody in this room belongs to a parish where there's some folks you can point to as saying, wow, that person's a really good steward. They're contributing their time, talent, and treasure well beyond. Well, tell the story to your parishioners, to let their parishioners know about these people, about the examples that are being set in your very own parish. So we asked folks, well, do you communicate with your parishioners on stewardship in either of these ways? 93% said, yeah, we do this through our parish bulletin. Not very effective. Why not? Well, first of all, the parish bulletin is very limited space, right? How much space do you have to talk about? You really can't tell the true story about stewardship of the parish bulletin. Plus, it only reaches those who attend Mass that particular Sunday. And you've seen the stats this morning. It's a minority of your parishioners. Again, I'm not saying don't put it in your parish bulletin, but don't only put it in your parish bulletin because it won't be very successful. How about a newsletter? I hope by now all of you have parish newsletters. That's the best way to reach your parishioners. 32% said, yeah, we communicate about stewardship through our newsletter. 23% increase in contributions. Because then you can tell the story. You have room and space there to tell the story. And the newsletter reaches everybody. How about your website? 41% said we talk about stewardship on our website. That was a 30% increase. I imagine over time the website will outpace the newsletter as the primary focus for talking about stewardship. How about your parishioner financial commitment? How about tithing? 18% of the parishes in our sample said that they teach tithing. They preach tithing. Now, tithing means different things to different people. For some, it's literally 10% of your income. Others, it's 8% to the church, 2% to other causes. Some, it's 5% to the church, 5% to other causes. Some, it really merely refers to, we want to focus on a percent of your income, whatever it is. Anyways, churches that talk about tithing, that set this model, this example, 27% increase in contributions. How about pledging? falling short of pledging, but getting your folks to make a commitment to the church. 54% told us that they use some form of pledging. I have to tell you, pledging is not a very popular idea among Catholics. We've held focus groups where I've raised a topic. I remember one woman saying, pledging? That's a stupid Protestant idea. Like it's one word, stupid Protestant. That's a stupid Protestant. No, it's not. It's something that we need our folks to make a commitment. Remember, one woman said, pledging? You want me to commit to my church for a whole year? How much I'm going to have to contribute? I'm thinking, wow. I mean, you go out and you buy a car and get a 5-year car loan. You go buy a vacation home somewhere and get a mortgage, but you won't commit to your church for 1 year? Yeah, that's a concern. Other folks are worried that, if I pledge, the pastor will know how much I'm going to give. And so when I need help, the pastor will look at my pledge and decide what kind of a wedding I'm going to get, what kind of a funeral I'm going to get. You hear some things like that. Anyways, there's good ways of doing pledging. There's a parish I know of where that very issue, they give folks pledge sheets. And on Pledge Sunday, they ask folks to come to Mass with their pledge. At some point, they have a procession where folks walk up, and their pledge sheet is a tear-off. One side is their name, the other side is how much they're pledging. So they walk up, they tear it apart, they'll get hurt. In one basket, they put their name, the other side they pledge. So the parish knows who's pledging, but not how much. Another parish I know of, again, they have a Pledge Sunday, give folks the pledge sheets, have a procession, folks walk up, drop their pledges in the basket. When they're all done, the pastor comes out, starts a fire, throws the pledges on the fire. The idea being your pledge is between you and God. The point is, we should be making a commitment. If you're a Catholic, you should be willing to make this sort of a commitment to your church. Does it work? Yeah, 16% increase. Okay. A more recent variation on pledging is electronic transfer, electronic giving. Any of your parishes offer electronic giving? Yeah, you should. Yeah. That's a form of pledging. Folks indicate how much they're going to give. Typically, the electronic pledge is taken out the first of the month, so it's your first fruits, which is good stewardship. My stats show that families that start with electronic transfers increase their contribution by 38%. Why? Well, because if you're like I used to be, the amount you gave each month, depending on what day of the month it was. Early in the month, a little more flush with cash, give a little bit more. In the month, a little not as well off, give much less. A lot of Catholics are not there in Mass on Sunday. They're on vacation or sick, whatever, they won't make it up. But if you make this commitment, the electronic transfer commitment, you'll be giving no matter what. You're making that commitment, whether you're there or not, whether there's a lot of money in your checkbook or not, you're making that contribution. Of course, different folks have different reasons for electronic giving. I have a friend who gives electronically through his credit card, so we can get airline miles. I guess, you have to reach folks where they're at. Anyway, we need commitment. We need folks to make a commitment. My Protestant friends say, Chuck, how do your parishes operate? I mean, they're blind. They have no idea how much revenue they're going to get this year. Because, Protestants tend to pledge or tithe. It's a miracle that our parishes do as well as they do, given that their budget is just in flux all the time. Okay, how about parish financial accountability and transparency? Catholics more and more, and especially the younger groups, say, I want to know where that money's going. If you want me to give more money, tell me where it's going. Better yet, give me an input on where it's going. I don't need the final say, but at least ask me, what do you think our parish priorities should be? Where should our money be going? Some parishes actually hold open forums, like town hall meetings, to discuss finances. 14% of the parish in our sample held town hall meetings, open forums, to discuss the parish budget. How'd that work out? 29% increase in contributions. When folks feel a connection to the parish through that, they give more. One of my favorite quotes from Pope Emeritus Benedict He talked about the co-responsibility of Catholics. He said, in effect, you know, the model used to be we were collaborating with the pastor. So he now said, no, you're co-responsible with the pastor. You are responsible along with the pastor for the good of your parish. Now, if I'm going to feel that sense of co-responsibility and act on it, I should have some say in parish finances. Yeah, not the final say, but at least a consultative say through open forums like this. A lot of parishes put their parish budget reports on the website. 18% told us they do that. That doesn't work too well. Some send the reports directly to parishioners. 42% mail out the reports, the budget every year to every parishioner and registered. Doesn't work too well. Some have reports presented weekend masses. 31% say, you know, at one point in the year we have the chair of the finance committee come up and talk about the budget. Doesn't work too well. Again, these last three are all passive. They really don't give parishioners any effort, any ability at all to have a say in parish finances. And more Catholics, especially the younger they are, the more likely to believe that if you want my money, I should have a say. So, if you're worried about raising finances through stewardship, what are the 5 best things you could do? First of all, open parish forum to discuss finances and budget. We saw that led to an increase in 29%. In other words, be transparent and accountable. Give your parishioners some input, some consultative voice in how you're spending their money, or what your parish priorities are. Preach tithing. Again, get folks to make a commitment. Through tithing, pledging, whatever it is, get folks to make a commitment. That led to a 27% increase. Have a stewardship committee. And again, it's better to have it separate. In my mind, it should be on the level, this is not canonical, but on the level of the finance council and the pastoral council. There should be 3 main councils in the parish: pastoral council, finance council, and the stewardship committee. Communicate on stewardship through the parish newsletter. Tell people what stewardship is, what it isn't. Give examples of good stewardship. And again, have a separate stewardship committee, not part of the pastoral council or the finance council. Okay, challenge 2, internal financial controls. You don't have to read too many newspapers in a week to find a case where there was some embezzlement taking place in a church. You know, Catholic churches, but also Protestant. We all have that same problem. Okay? Because churches in general, and Catholic churches in particular, don't put in the kind of internal financial controls in their parish that are commonplace in the business world. I have a lot of business friends who are scandalized by what they see as a lack of internal controls in their parish. They can't believe that the parish can operate that way. If you try to implement internal financial controls, you get some pushback. If you try to do something different, you get some pushback. People will say, what, you don't trust me? What are you doing this for? Well, here's your response. This is for your own protection. If, God forbid, there's money missing or something happening and there's any question at all, if we have the proper internal financial controls in place, we are all protected. Okay, it's for your own goods, for your own protection. A pastor of all people should be the one insisting on strong internal financial controls. So a few years ago, my colleague at Villanova, Bob West, and I did a survey of diocesan CFOs. We found that 85% of Catholic dioceses have reported embezzlements in the last 5-year period. 85%. Now let me say, some had more than one. There's some classic cases of millions of dollars. One parish in Florida had one priest that they found embezzled $8 million, and successor embezzled another $2 million. 2 guys between them wound up going to jail for embezzling $10 million. We in Philadelphia have had issues like that as well. The problem is church of two trusts, as I said before. No one would think that a priest would embezzle from the church. No one would think that a lay worker, whether volunteer or paid, would embezzle. So we don't put in the kind of internal controls, as I said, that are routine in the business world. But we have to. We have to. That's good stewardship. Our surveys show that when there is an embezzlement, 93% of the cases, a police report was filed, and 91% insurance claim was filed. We didn't always report these to the police, so we were embarrassed. So we try to do it, sweep it under the carpet, and just tell the person, well, we're going to fire you, but that's it because we don't want the bad publicity. But now we see that we have to set an example of people that take advantage of their situation. So in the survey we asked CFOs, what worries you most about your diocesan finances? And of course, the first thing was litigation. You know, the clergy abuse scandal litigation is still going on, and Paradise is still declaring bankruptcy. That's Helena, 2 weeks ago? But that was followed closely by what's happening in the parish. They're almost as concerned about what's happening in their parishes, the lack of internal financial controls, as they are with what's happening with litigation. So we said, well, how often do you audit your parishes? You know, that's one way of finding it. How often do you audit it? Well, some did internal audits. That is, a diocesan official comes out, as opposed to an external audit where you hire an accounting firm. 3% of the diocese said they do it annually. 21% said never. We never audit our parishes. 28% said we audit our parishes when there's a change in the pastor. Okay? One of the best ways to prevent fraud, embezzlement, is to have regular audits and random audits if possible. Now, it's expensive. You know, it's a lot of churches say, well, geez, Chuck, you know, it's nice for you to say that, it's easy for you to say that, but it's expensive. Well, yeah, it's expensive, but so is theft. Okay, we asked the CFOs, do you have a formal written policy? Well, what do you do if there's a fraud discovered? Only 39% had a procedure that the pastors knew they could follow if they discovered fraud. Most likely to detect the fraud was the parish priest, business manager, auditor. Whenever I hear about a fraud, an embezzlement in a parish, the first thing I say to myself is, where's the finance council? Where's your parish finance council? How can you have fraud in your parish if your finance council is doing its job? Unfortunately, too many finance councils are rubber stamp. You know, pastor appoints some friends who will not challenge anything and not care if they don't see the regular reports. Pastors, you need a good finance council. Why? It's for your own protection. Okay, so we, Bob and I found these, and we said, you know, we really should learn more about this, because this caught us totally off guard. So a second study was done. Actually, this was a study done with some of my friends at CARA and myself. This was a co-authored, a true collaboration between CARA and us. We resulted in the book, Best Practices of Catholic Pastoral and Finance. We look at both pastoral and finance councils. Here's what we found. As far as transparency and accountability, how many parishes do you think tell their parishioners about what's happening in the finance council? Give them show them the minutes. Well, 40% make them on request. If you ask, you can have them. 60% put them in the parish bulletin. Some post them on parish grounds, parish website, newsletter, mail to homes. Half the parishes don't tell their parishioners anything about what's happening in the finance council. I mean, you don't have to have the detailed minutes, you know, what Joe said, what Mary said, but we should give the parishioners at least a report, I think a quarterly report, where are we with respect to our finances as opposed to budgeted. You know, at least that, so parishioners know, they understand. So that if we're falling behind, the revenues are falling behind budgeted, you have that conversation. Start that conversation sooner rather than later. Don't wait till 2 weeks before the fiscal year ends to tell the parishioners, oh, by the way, we're not going to meet our budget this year. If parishioners see the minutes, they'll understand it's happening sooner rather than later. How about communication with parishioners on budget preparation? Not the final budget, but the budget preparation. How about the draft budget? Half the parishes, the preliminary budget presented to the pastoral council. That's a real problem, because the pastoral council's task is to set the parish priorities. They're planning for the parish. They're telling the parish, advising the pastor, this is what our parish needs, this is the kind of priorities we should have, this is what parishioners are telling us. Well, that's got to be reflected in the budget. You know, the budget's no good if it's not reflecting what the pastoral council and the pastor are deciding as far as the parish plan is concerned, parish priorities. So if anybody knows about the parish budget early, the preliminary budget, it's got to be the pastoral council. They should work together all the time, like hand in glove. Only happens in half the parish in the country. That's a problem. 14% explained it in the budget, in the bulletin rather. 10%, they give a presentation in Mass. Again, this is the preliminary budget. 4% actually have a budget presentation, like a town hall meeting. Newsletter, 4%. Budget mail to homes, 4%. But for 60% of the parishes, the typical parishioner, a guy like me, has no idea what's happening as the budget is unfolded. They'll show me the final budget eventually, but I have no opportunity to view it or to have any input into it. It's not co-responsibility. If you want a guy like me to get more money, give me a say. Okay, how about the final budget? How are we going to communicate that? Well, 38% put the final budget in the bulletin, 33% mass, 19% newsletter, 19% mail, 16% parish grounds, 8% website, and only 1% of the budget not shared. Now that's good. Okay, I'm happy that 99% of our parishes at least share the final budget of their parishioners. Better than nothing. Okay, another issue with internal controls is number of bank accounts. Number of bank accounts held by the parish should be limited. You can't control it when there's tons of bank accounts floating around. Allows for too many missteps. I was talking to a pastor once. He recently appointed a pastor to a parish. He said, Chuck, when I walked in the door of that parish, I found out there were 54 separate bank accounts in that parish. He said, now some were dormant, but for the most part, these were, every organization thought they needed their own bank account. And I'm sure you must hear that, those of you who are involved in your parish finances. Every organization said, well, we're different. We need our own bank account. No, you don't. We'll give you a line item in the parish bank checking account, but you don't need your own bank account. The school probably, okay? I go for the school having a separate account from the parish, but otherwise, no. The Diocese of San Diego, when they went bankrupt a few years ago, they had to reveal all kinds of things. The average parish in San Diego had 8 different bank accounts. You can't control things that have 8 different groups with their own bank account, their own checking account, floating around the parish. Our survey showed that 40% of the parish had more than one checking account, not counting the school, presumably held by parish organizations. That is really unhealthy. That's a real disaster waiting to happen. How about those who can sign the checks? Or I should limit it. Not everybody should be able to sign the check. But for large checks, you should have at least 2 people. Okay, we found, what did we find? The average number of authorized check signers was 1.4 in a parish. In 2/3 of the parishes, only 1 person is authorized to sign checks, no matter how large. Isn't that a temptation that you don't want to give people? No matter how big the charge, we're going to let you sign the check. Okay? So you should have at least 2 people signing whatever a large size check is for your situation. Varies from parish to parish. A real important issue is segmentation of duties, dividing up the duties of the finances. There are parishes where 1 person counts the collection, that same person deposits the collection, that same person writes all the checks, and that same person reconciles the checkbook. That's a lot. I don't know of anybody that can resist that temptation. I mean, you have total control. In fact, I have a friend who was telling me that back in the 60s, I guess her father was very well respected, because back in the 60s, after the last Sunday Mass, her father would take all the collection money home and count it. And on his way to work the next day, he would deposit in the bank. Saying, wow, that's a lot of trust. I hope nobody ever trusts me that much, and I'm not sure I'm going to live up to that. So we've got to segment those. We've got to separate them, make sure that different folks do different things. If nothing else, the bank statements should be reconciled by someone other than check signers. So we asked, okay, of those who reconcile your checkbook, the same person, 5% of the parish, the same person, so responsible for both writing the checks and reconciling the bank statements. So they wrote the checks and then they reconciled later on. About 6% of the parish, the same person was responsible for depositing the Sunday collection and reconciling the bank statements. Again, there's an opportunity there. And about 1/3 of the parish's non-collection revenue, the revenues the parish might have raised, was deposited by 1 person who also reconciles the checkbook. Okay, Again, that's real dangerous. You're putting a lot of faith in people, and I wouldn't want that kind of faith, because you know what? It's for my own protection. Another approach to segmentation of duties is counting the collection. You should have rotating counting crews. About 5% of the parishes, only one individual counts the Sunday collection. That's scary. About 40% of the parishes employ a regular crew of counters with an average of about 5 members. So some parishes, it's like a social event. Two couples get together, they do this every Sunday, they count the money, and they go out for brunch. Every Sunday, week after week after week. Do you know how many frauds are found because the collection counter was sick one Sunday, or was missing one Sunday, and all of a sudden the collection went up by $3,000 that week? Really, that's one way to. So if you're engaged in fraud, you never take a vacation, never get sick, because that's how you get caught. Half the parishes do it the right way. They utilize rotating collection counting teams with at least 4 members per crew. Okay, that's the right way. Yeah, that's consistent with segmentation of duties. Okay, checks should be drawn according to procedures prescribing adequate supporting documentation. Your parishioners have to know if they want to be reimbursed for an expense that they incur on behalf of the parish, they need to present the documentation. No questions asked. Okay? Again, the parishioners will push back. They'll say, "Oh, geez, you don't trust me? I spent this money. You don't trust me?" What's your response? It's for your own protection. Yeah. Okay. So it's got to happen. So what are my recommendations with respect to internal financial controls? The parish level, rotating collection teams. Make sure that there's segmentation of duties in the sense that those who disperse the funds are different from those who count it or receive it. Multiple signs on checks of large amounts. An open, transparent, and accountable parish budget processing. Let folks know what's happening. The more they know, the more light you shine on it, the more likely you won't have any problems. Encourage persons to use electronic transfers. Again, that's one way to avoid fraud, is if we're depositing directly, then that takes some of the opportunities for fraud out of the equation. Make sure that you have the opportunity for church workers to report irregularities. Some dioceses have an anonymous hotline. If you see something irregular happening in your parish, you can report to the diocese anonymously so that it can be checked on. I think the names and profession of every member of the finance council should be public. In fact, I think the pastoral council too. I think every parish, the vestibule of the church, should have the pictures of the pastoral council members so that everybody knows who they are. If something comes up, they want to address them. And the finance council members, they should be well known. And there should be conflict of interest guidelines. There's nothing wrong with parishioners doing business with the parish. That should be encouraged. But under conflict of interest guidelines. These guidelines should apply to every parishioner, but especially finance council members who in many cases are responsible for selecting contracts. That should be well known. Finance council, again, must be more than just a rubber stamp organization. There should be at least quarterly, preferably more often. The diocese should have fraud policies. So if everybody knows what's going to happen if a fraud occurs. How do we report this? What are the procedures for the diocese? Annual random audits of parishes. And external audits conducted at least every 3 years. Again, it's terribly expensive, and not every diocese can do that, but that's the ideal. Uniform budgeting process and standardized software for all diocesan entities. Does Philadelphia have a standardized software? Do we? Some say yes, some say no. That makes it so much easier for the diocese in general to collect the data that they need to collect, and it also makes it easier to detect anything that shouldn't be happening. Okay, and here's, again, the anonymous reporting opportunity for the diocese. So the church is not a business. Let me make very clear about it. We're not a business. We do have a stewardship responsibility, and part of that stewardship responsibility involves sound internal financial controls. The root of the issue is that we tend to be too trusting. Nobody would think that a priest or lay person would steal, but it happens. and if we fail to implement basic internal financial controls. All churches face this problem. I want to emphasize that, not just the Catholics. Protestants have the same problem. The difference is our parishes are larger. When there's a theft in our parish, it's a larger amount, so it gets more publicity. But really, all parishes suffer the same sort of issues. Okay, challenge 3, parish staffing organizational structure. I pulled this from a book by Father Tom Sweetser, the noted parish consultant. So according to Father Sweetser, this is the organizational structure of the 20th century parish. It's a circle with a pastor in the middle. Everything goes to the pastor, right? What Father Sweetser is proposing is this shape, an ellipse. What's the difference? A circle has one focus. In terms of the parish, it's the pastor. An ellipse has 2 foci? Focuses? Whatever. It's 2, okay? So that the parish organizational structure should have the pastor and some sort of parish administrator, business manager, whatever you want to call that person, but make sure that they divide up their duties. So there's certain things the pastor has to do that nobody else can do. The pastor does those. There's a lot of other things that happen in the parish that anyone could do, a layperson could do. And for the most part, those duties should be done by someone other than the pastor. We're killing our guys. We're killing our priests. We're asking them to be spiritual leaders and temporal leaders, and parish getting more and more complex, and it's harder on them, and again, there's no training. Seminaries don't do a good job of training their guys to administer parishes, to do the management part. Now, a exception to that rule is St. Charles Seminary. Bishop Senior is working with us, with our center. We're providing management education for their seminarians over the summer. So over the summer, while their seminarians are more or less interning in parishes, one day a week he has them come to us. And we make some presentations on different aspects of parish management. He was in the back, say, okay, listen, this is what you heard. Talk to your pastor supervisor in your parish about how what we just said applies in your parish. Let's get the practical element here. Then write a 5-page paper. So every week these guys are writing 5-page papers about what they learned in our classes and how it's being applied in the parish where they're interning, so that they get a good feel for these are the issues they're going to be facing. Writing that paper is not real popular with the seminarians, in all honesty. You know, they're in the summer. But we think it's an important part, that they're not just passive observers, that they're actually active participants in this process. Anyway, back to Father Sweetser's model. So he says, we need to. We have to. We can't expect the pastor to be the temporal leader in all things anymore. That's got to change. We need some sort of parish administrator. So, recent survey, we asked a parish, do you have a full-time administrator, business manager, pastoral associate, whatever you would call them? Only 20% said, yeah, it's full-time. I think that's low. I think it's probably higher, personally. Another 2% said, yeah, we share with another parish. Okay. We need a full-time administrator in every parish, at least shared, hopefully for larger parishes by themselves, but at least shared. Okay, so we asked, who does your paid ministry staff report to? By ministry staff, I'm referring to the DRE, the music minister, the youth minister, folks like that. Who do your professional ministry staff report to? Well, almost 91% said, well, they report to the pastor or the parish life coordinator, in a case where there's no pastor. Another 2.8% said, well, they report to the administrator, whoever that person might be. 3% said, well, a combination. Some report to the pastor, some to the administrator, and the rest some other approach. Okay, I found that interesting. Then we asked, how about the non-ministry staff? Who does your secretary report to? Who's your bookkeeper report to? Who's your custodian report to? The non-ministry staff. 71% report to the pastor. Does that make any sense at all? About a quarter report to the manager, administrator. 2.4% combination, some report to the pastor, some to the manager, and again, other two. Does it make any sense to have almost 3/4 of the parishes have non-ministry staff, put the pastor in charge of non-ministry staff, put the pastor in charge of the custodian. I mean, we're killing these guys, I said before, we ask them to do the pastoral stuff, which is overwhelming. And in most cases, they're in the parish by themselves now. And at the same time, we're asking them to do this temporal stuff. The Sweetser model has to take hold. We have to recognize the importance of our paid professional business manager staff and make sure that staff in the parish understand they report to administrator, not to the pastor. And make sure parishioners understand that. That's another thing. So parishioners say, gee, I found a problem here with the grounds, this cracked sidewalks. I better go tell the pastor. No, don't tell the pastor. Tell the administrator. The pastor can't take care of that. Tell the administrator. So we have to do that. We have to change our structure. So in conclusion, we need to find ways to reduce the burden of temple management on parish priests. This is just a handful of the issues that I could talk about today, but I know you're waiting to hear Father White, and I'm waiting to hear me. So I have a couple minutes for questions. So anybody? Questions? Yes?
I just want to make sure I'm clear that the parish administrator and the business manager can be one and the same.
Oh, it is. Yeah,
It's
it's a different title. It's a one person doing either as title administrator or manager. Yes. Yes.
We heard the best practice for the pastor opens the mail once a week.
Yeah, the question there was, have I heard of the best practice where the pastor opens the mail once a week? I'm not sure it's the best practice.
See what's going on.
You can see what's going on. If the pastor has a trustworthy staff, that wouldn't be necessary, to tell you the truth. But if not, then, let's face it, some of us are control freaks. And I include myself in that. But I'm not sure that's the best use of a pastor's time. Yes? Yeah, the question is multiple parishes sharing one administrator. I highly encourage that. It can be expensive to hire a good administrator, and parishes can achieve economies of scale by many of them, especially smaller parishes sharing them. That's a great idea. I might give a plug to our program here. We offer a master's degree in church management, and our primary function is to train business managers for parishes. A lot of folks would like to be business managers, but it's a little bit different than the corporate world, so we try to train them to take on that role. All right, so much for my commercial. Anybody else? Yeah.
For about 9 years now, I've been banging the drum in our parish about electronic giving.
Electronic giving,
Okay, we showed how much it increases. Okay? In fact, I'm probably going to be addressing our parish and various masses coming up in 2 weeks again. I just put something in our parish bulletin about it, particularly in light of the fact that we have this lousy weather. People are missing mass.
Mm-hmm.
Difficulty of trying to catch up. There are those that double up or triple up check is too large. Most of the time, people choose the parish.
Sure. Yeah.
What pushback have you heard in your parishes to electronic giving? Have you heard? I'd just like to open up a little bit. The number one thing that I've heard in ours is I feel funny not handing in a number.
Yeah.
And my suggestion on that in my newsletter or my parish bulletin was, if that's the case, then commit half to electronic giving and still just put the other half in. But I'm willing, I like to hear it because I'm going to get pushback.
Yeah, there's usually a space on the envelope where you can check and say, I'm giving electronically. And Father, in many cases, we see people doing that. They'll commit themselves electronically, they'll check that box on the envelope, and they'll still stuff a few bucks or a check in the envelope. That's an issue, but it can be overcome. Any other solutions to Father's dilemma? Any other? You're not a father. Would you like to be? I have that authority. You're the chairman of the pastoral council. Oh, wow. All right. Okay, yeah.
Two other thoughts on that. One is a stat that kind of plays out, but the average Catholic goes to go weekly, only go to their parish 37 weeks a year. So when we put it in our parish, we talked about you can still give the same amount each week, but you'll actually increase your amount of giving by 25% just by doing it electronically. So doing it differently, and you can help the parish out 25% more, which was a big sell for a number of our Christians. The other thing we did, though, we do little laminated cards in the back of church with a basket that says, I give electronically.
Yeah.
So it's a witness to other people in the pew that people are giving electronically, as opposed to just checking the envelope. We wanted to highlight people who are giving electronically as a model for other people.
Did y'all hear that? Little cards, laminated cards in the back, so when you walk into Mass, you're giving electronic, you pick up one of those cards and then drop it in. And people see it's a visible sign to the other parishioners who's giving electronically. One last question, yes? The quick answer is no. And even if they did, as you know, the Bishops' Council can make recommendations, the USCCB can make recommendations, but they can't enforce them. Up to each bishop, how he wants to enforce it, and up to each pastor, how he wants to enforce it. So I know of nothing to answer your question that meets that standard. Okay, tell you what, take 5 minutes in place maybe while we get Father White set up, and then we'll continue with Father White's presentation. Thank you.